Sam, you shouldn't be here. It's Christmas with the family, and well, you know how it is. My adoptive mother, Helen, blocked the door to the house where I grew up for 29 years, her forced smile not hiding the discomfort in her eyes. Behind her, I could see the flashing lights of the Christmas tree, hear the laughter of my adoptive siblings, Eric and Hannah, and smell the aroma of the roast turkey they always prepared for the holidays. Same house, same family, same rejection as always. But I brought presents, I replied calmly, lifting the bags I had carried through the Omaha snow. I thought we could finally have a Christmas like a real family. Helen exchanged an uncomfortable glance with my adoptive father, Robert, who appeared behind her holding a glass of wine. "Look, Sam," he said, his voice heavy with barely concealed irritation. "We've talked about this. You're welcome to visit, but the holidays are for family." Family. The word echoed in my mind as it always did. 29 years living under this roof, and I still wasn't considered family. My name is Sam, and this wouldn't be the first time I'd spent Christmas alone. But it would definitely be the last time I'd allow them to treat me like an outsider. "It's okay," I replied, my voice calmer than it should have been. "I understand completely." What they didn't know was that I had expected this rejection. In fact, I had been counting on it. As Eric appeared in the doorway with his smug smile, holding a beer and clearly enjoying the moment, I remembered the words of my grandfather Henry the last time I visited him. "Sam, there are things about your history you need to know. Things that will change everything." "Really, Sam," Eric said, his voice heavy with cruel amusement. "You haven't gotten the hint yet? We have our own family tradition. You can create your own." Hannah appeared at his side, her eyes flashing with the same coldness I'd known since I was a child. "Maybe it's time you accepted that you don't belong here," she added, her voice sweet but venomous. I nodded, a small smile playing on my lips. "You're right. It's time I finally understood where I really belong." I walked back to my car, feeling the weight of their stares on my back. I could hear their low laughter, probably celebrating another victory over the troubled foster child, who never knew his place. What none of them knew was that I had spent the last 3 months investigating my true origins. What I discovered would not only change my life, but completely destroy theirs. I sat in my car, started the engine, and grabbed my phone. There was a message from my grandfather, "Ready to know the truth, boy?" I typed my reply, "More than ever." As I drove away from that house for the last time as the rejected Sam, I smiled. They thought they were kicking me out. In reality, they were setting me free. If you're enjoying this story of discovery and transformation, be sure to subscribe to the channel to see how some of life's biggest twists and turns happen when we least expect them. I drove to the restaurant where I had reserved a table for 6, naively hoping that this time would be different. That this time they would choose me. But as I sat alone staring at the 5 empty chairs around me, I no longer felt that familiar pain of rejection. I felt something much more dangerous, the absolute certainty that they had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. Because what I discovered about my real family wasn't just surprising. It was devastating to anyone who had ever underestimated me. The Meridian restaurant was packed for Christmas dinner. Families celebrated all around me, their laughter echoing off the exposed brick walls as I sat alone at a table reserved for 6. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with a kind smile, passed by for the 3rd time, glancing at the empty chairs. "Still waiting for someone?" she asked delicately. "No," I replied, forcing a smile. "I guess it's just me tonight." What she didn't know was that I had spent over $500 on this special reservation, hoping to create memories that would never happen. I had even ordered a custom cake with the phrase "family reunion" that now seemed like a cruel joke. Helen, my adoptive mother, had always been a master of subtle cruelty. When I was 8, she threw a birthday party for Hannah, my adoptive sister who was 2 years younger than me. The whole neighborhood was invited. I spent weeks making her a beaded bracelet, each bead carefully chosen. When Hannah opened my gift, Helen said loudly, "How cute, Sam. But you know Hannah prefers more sophisticated things." She took the bracelet and set it aside while Hannah tore open the expensive gifts from the other guests. The next day, I found my bracelet in the trash. Robert, my adoptive father, had his own way of reminding me that I didn't belong there. He owned a used car dealership in downtown Omaha and always talked about how Eric, my adoptive brother, would one day take over the family business. "It's important to keep things in the family, Sam," he said once during dinner when I was 16. Blood is thicker than water, you know. Eric, 3 years younger than me, loved these subtleties. He grew up knowing he was the heir apparent, the real son, while I was just a charity project gone wrong. You know, Sam, he said last week when I called to invite them over for dinner, sometimes I forget you're not really my brother. You adoptive family members are kind of temporary, right? Hannah, now 24, worked as a digital influencer and always posted family photos on social media. Photos where I never appeared. When I asked her about it once, she laughed, "You kind of ruin the aesthetic, Sam." No offense. All those years, I tried to be the perfect son. I graduated from a University of Nebraska with honors in finance, got a respectable job as a financial analyst, bought my own house at 25. I sent Helen and Robert money every month, even when they never asked for it. But nothing was ever enough. The only one who ever treated me like family was my grandfather Henry, Robert's father. He lived on a small farm 2 hours outside Omaha, and I spent every summer there as a kid. He taught me how to fix tractors, fish in the creek behind the property, and on warm nights he played guitar on the porch. "Sam," he would always say, "you're special in a way this family can't understand. But one day you'll find out just how special." I never understood what he meant. Until earlier today. The message on my cell phone was from Henry. "Boy, it's time you knew the truth about who you really are. Truths that will change everything." As I finished my lonely dinner, I remembered the phone call we had last week. Her voice sounded different, more urgent. "Sam, have you ever wondered why I always treated you differently? Why I always knew you were destined for great things? Grandpa, you've always been the only one who supported me." "No, Sam. It's more than that. Much more." He paused for a long time, as if gathering the courage for something monumentally important. "Your real name isn't Sam Miller. And Helen and Robert, well, they know exactly who you are. They always have." My heart raced. "What do you mean?" "Meet me at the farm tomorrow morning. Bring a suitcase, because once you know the truth, your life will never be the same." Now, sitting in this empty restaurant, staring at the chairs that should have been filled by my family, I finally understood. They didn't reject me today out of casual cruelty. They rejected me because they knew exactly what I was about to discover. And what I discovered about my true identity would not only explain why they never accepted me, but it would also give me the power to completely destroy the comfortable life they built at my expense. I paid the bill, left a generous tip for the waitress who took pity on me, and left the restaurant. As I walked to my car through the Omaha snow, my phone vibrated with a message from Eric. "Hope you enjoyed your solo dinner, brother. Maybe next year you'll learn to accept your place." I smiled for the first time in hours. If Eric knew what I was about to discover, he would never have sent that message. Because the day after tomorrow, he would be the one who needed to learn about place. And unlike me, he wouldn't have 29 years to adjust to his new reality. The road to Grandpa Henry's farm had never seemed so long. 2 hours of driving across the frozen plains of Nebraska, with only the sound of the engine and the echo of his words on the phone. They know exactly who you are. They always have. Every mile took me further away not only from Omaha, but from the life I thought I knew. My mind obsessively replayed the last 29 years, searching for clues I had overlooked, signs I had misinterpreted. Why did Helen always make a point of introducing me as Sam, our adopted son, to strangers? Why did Robert look away when I asked about my biological family? Why did Eric and Hannah always seem to share an inside joke when the subject came up? My cell phone vibrated. A message from Hannah. "Mom said you disappeared after dinner." Typical drama queen. Some people never learn to accept reality. For the first time in years, I didn't feel that familiar pang of pain. I felt something different, a cold, calculating anger growing in my chest like a flame fed by pure oxygen. I stopped at the gas station where I always stopped when I visited my grandfather. The same attendant, a black man in his 50s named Marcus, waved from the window. "Visiting Henry?" he asked, as he always did. "Yes, Marcus. As usual." "You know," he said, lowering his voice and looking around as if someone might be listening, "your grandfather asked me something strange last week. He asked if I remembered when you were a kid, if I noticed anything different about the way your family treated you." I stopped filling the tank. "What did you say?" Marcus sighed deeply. I told him the truth. That I always thought it was strange how they seemed. I don't know, awkward when you were around. Like they had something to hide. He paused, his eyes meeting mine. Sam, I worked in Denver before I came here. In the wealthy area. Your grandfather worked there for years too. He never told you about that. My heart raced. No. What do you know about Denver? I know your grandfather had reasons for moving away. Reasons involving a very powerful family and a very complicated situation. Marcus looked out the window again, then leaned closer. I also know that he kept documents all these years. Documents he would only show you when you were ready for the truth. I finished filling up in silence, my mind processing this new information. Denver. Documents. A powerful family. The pieces were starting to fit together in a way that left me simultaneously terrified and furious. When I arrived at the farm, I found Grandpa Henry sitting on the porch, even in the December cold. He was wearing his heavy wool coat and holding a cup of coffee that steamed in the frosty air. You came, he said, no surprise in his voice. Of course I did. Now tell me everything. Henry led me inside the house to his living room, warmed by a crackling fireplace. On the coffee table was an old cardboard box, yellowed with age and tied with string. Before you open this, he said, his hands trembling slightly, I need you to understand something. I made choices that seemed right at the time. Choices that ended up causing you a lot of pain. I sat down in the chair opposite him, my heart beating so hard I was sure he could hear it. Your real name, Henry began, is Samuel David Thornton. You are the son of Clara Thornton, heir to one of the largest real estate fortunes in Colorado. The world stopped. It literally stopped. I could hear the ticking of the old clock on the wall, the crackling of the fire, but the words made no sense. Thornton. I whispered. Thornton Enterprises. They own half the commercial buildings in Denver, have investments in Seattle, Phoenix, Dallas. Your mother, Clara, is now the CEO of the company. Henry untied the string and opened the box. Inside were photographs, legal documents, birth certificates, and on top, a sealed letter with my name written in elegant handwriting. When Clara was 19, she fell in love with a musician. Her parents, especially her father, Charles Thornton, were furious. They disowned her when they found out she was pregnant. He handed me a photograph. A young blonde woman with blue eyes identical to mine, holding a baby I recognized as myself. Clara came to me in desperation. I had been the family driver for 15 years. She trusted me. She asked me to find a good family to take care of you while she rebuilt her life. My voice came out hoarse. And you chose Robert and Helen? They were my son and daughter-in-law. I thought you would be loved, cared for as part of the family. I was wrong. Henry took a document from the box. But there was one condition to the agreement. Clara deposited $500,000 into a trust fund for your upbringing. Money that Robert and Helen used to buy the house, the cars, pay for Eric and Hannah's private schools. Reality hit me like a hammer. They raised me with my own money. Worse than that, Sam. They knew that when you turned 30, Clara planned to reconnect with you. They knew you would discover the truth about your heritage, about who you really are. I opened Clara's letter with trembling hands. Her handwriting was elegant, her words filled with love and remorse. My dear Samuel, every day for the past 29 years, I have thought about you. I rebuilt my life, our company, our fortune, all in the hope that one day you would forgive me and accept your place by my side. You are not just my son, you are my heir, my successor, my reason for continuing to fight. I dropped the letter, feeling tears that hadn't come in years burning in my eyes. They knew, I murmured. They always knew I wasn't just some orphan. They knew I had a family, a future, an inheritance. Henry nodded gravely. And they knew that when the truth came out, everything would change. That's why they never treated you like a son. That's why they always kept you at a distance. I grabbed my phone and looked at Hannah's message again. Some people never learn to accept reality. I smiled for the first time in hours. A cold, calculating smile. You're right, Hannah, I whispered into the phone. Some people never do. Henry watched me carefully. What are you going to do, Sam? I stood up from the chair, tucking the letter into my pocket. I'm going to Denver. I'm going to find my real mother. And then... I paused, thinking of Robert spending my inheritance, of Helen introducing me as her adopted son, of Eric calling me temporary, of Hannah excluding me from family photos. Then I'm going to show them what happens when you underestimate someone for 29 years. Henry smiled, but it was a worried smile. Just remember, kid. Revenge can be satisfying, but don't let it consume who you really are. I nodded, but my mind was already formulating plans. Plans that involved much more than just finding my biological mother. Clara Thornton had rebuilt an empire. It was time for me to claim my place in it. And to use every dollar, every connection, every resource to ensure that Robert, Helen, Eric, and Hannah never treated anyone the way they had treated me. Because if there was one thing I had learned in 29 years of rejection, it was exactly how to destroy a family from the inside. The difference was that now I had the means to do it. The call to Clara Thornton in Denver was the most important conversation of my life. Her voice trembled when I answered, as if she had been waiting for this moment for decades. "Samuel," she whispered, and for the first time in 29 years, I heard someone say my real name with love. "Yes, Mom. It's me." What followed was a 3-hour conversation that changed everything. Clara told me about the 29 years she spent building the Thornton Empire, always with one goal in mind, to be prepared for when I came home. "I hired private investigators to monitor you discreetly," she admitted. "I knew about every promotion, every achievement, every time Robert and Helen humiliated you. I wanted to intervene 1,000 times, but Henry convinced me you needed to discover the truth on your own." Thornton Enterprises wasn't just a real estate company. It was a conglomerate with tentacles in urban development, investments, and most importantly, several companies in Omaha. "In fact," Clara said with a tone I recognized as strategic, "we're silent investors in Miller Auto Sales." Robert's business. My heart raced. "How much did you invest?" 60% of the operations. Robert never knew the money came from us. He thinks he got a very favorable bank loan 5 years ago. I smiled for the first time since Christmas dinner. That means that with one phone call, I can call in the loan in full, or transfer majority ownership to wherever I want. Over the next few days, I worked with Clara to devise a plan that wasn't just about revenge, but about justice. Robert and Helen had used $500,000 of my inheritance to raise their biological children while treating me like trash. Eric had squandered opportunities that my money had paid for. Hannah lived a life of luxury financed by my pain. It was time to settle the score. The first step was subtle. Clara arranged a routine audit at Miller Auto Sales. Robert called me, something he hadn't done in years. "Sam, do you have any contacts in finance? These auditors are asking very specific questions about our operations." His voice was tense, worried. For the first time, he needed me. "Sure, Dad," I replied, using the title he never allowed me to use comfortably. "I can take a look at the documents if you want." Meanwhile, Clara used her connections to investigate Eric and Hannah. What we discovered was even worse than we had imagined. Eric had racked up $50,000 in online gambling debts, using the family address as a reference. Hannah had falsified her income on applications for 3 different credit cards, listing Robert as a guarantor without his knowledge. "They're as irresponsible as they are cruel," Clara observed during one of our nightly phone calls. "Perfect for our purposes." The plan evolved into something elegant. We weren't just going to expose their hypocrisy, we were going to use their weaknesses against them. For Robert, discovering that his company was being run by the adopted son he despised. For Helen, that the money she used to raise her biological children came from the child she never loved. For Eric, that his debts would be called in all at once, without his parents' financial protection. For Hannah, that her life as an influencer would be exposed as a sham built on money that didn't belong to her family. But there was one obstacle. The family lawyer, Marcus Webb, had been friends with Robert for decades. He knew details about my adoption that could complicate our approach legally. "Don't worry," Clara said. "Marcus Webb lost his license to practice law in Colorado 3 years ago for misconduct. He can't practice law here, and I doubt he mentioned that to Robert." Another piece fell into place. The final irony came when Helen called on New Year's Eve. "Sam dear," she said, her voice sweetened in a way that made me feel nauseous. "Would you like to join us for New Year's dinner? I know Christmas was complicated." Interesting. She was worried about something. Sure, Mom. I'd love to. The next day, Clara arrived in Omaha. Not as my biological mother visiting, but as the CEO of Thornton Enterprises conducting business. She stayed at the most luxurious hotel in town, driving a black Tesla that cost more than Robert's house. "Ready?" she asked when we met in the hotel lobby. I looked at my reflection in the elevator mirror. I was no longer Sam Miller, the rejected foster child. I was Samuel David Thornton, heir to an empire, son of one of the most powerful women in Colorado. More than ready. New Year's dinner was going to be interesting. Especially since Robert, Helen, Eric, and Hannah had no idea that the woman who controlled their financial future would be sitting at the table. If you're following this journey of discovery and transformation, be sure to subscribe to the channel, because what happened that New Year's Eve changed not only my life, but the definition of poetic justice. As Clara checked the final documents in the hotel room, I smiled thinking about the look on Robert's face when he found out that the adopted son he had despised for decades now controlled his business. But that would only be the beginning. Because what they didn't know was that Clara had prepared surprises that would turn that night of celebration into the complete implosion of the life they had built at my expense. And unlike all the other humiliations I had suffered, this time I would have the power to decide exactly how and when the truth would be revealed. The New Year's Eve dinner at Robert and Helen's house was exactly as I expected. The polished mahogany table, the expensive crystalware I had financed without knowing it, and the same atmosphere of feigned superiority that had suffocated me for 29 years. "Sam!" Helen exclaimed when I opened the door, her forced hug more theatrical than usual. "We're so happy you came. After the Christmas misunderstanding." Robert appeared from the kitchen, a glass of wine in his hand, looking visibly stressed. "Sam, I'm glad you're here. We need to talk about some business matters later." Eric was on the couch, scrolling through his phone, clearly uncomfortable with my presence. Hannah was posting stories on Instagram, documenting the perfect family reunion from which I was, naturally, being excluded from the photos. "Family," I announced calmly, "I'd like to introduce someone special. This is Clara Thornton, CEO of Thornton Enterprises in Denver." The silence that followed was delicious. Robert almost dropped his glass. Helen paled instantly. Eric finally looked up from his phone. Clara entered with the natural elegance of someone who commands boardrooms. His Hugo Boss suit cost more than Eric's monthly salary, and his bearing made it clear that he was no ordinary woman. "Thornton Enterprises," Robert repeated slowly, as if testing the words. "I know that company. You're our lead investors." Clara smiled, the kind of smile CEOs use before firing someone. "Not exactly, Robert. We own you." The color drained completely from Robert's face. Helen clung to the arm of her chair. "Let me clarify," I continued, my voice calmer than it had ever been in this house. "My real name is Samuel David Thornton. Clara is my biological mother. And you just had dinner with the new owner of Miller Auto Sales." Eric dropped the phone. Hannah stopped posting altogether. "That's impossible," Helen whispered. "You're our adopted son. We saved you from a life of misery." Clara laughed, a sound that echoed through the room like breaking glass. "Saved him? You used $500,000 of his inheritance to raise your own children while treating him like trash." I picked up a folder I had left in the entryway. 29 years of documentation. Every deposit, every expense, every time you introduced me as the adopted son instead of just my son. Robert tried to speak, but Clara cut him off. 43% of your sales over the last 5 years came from our network of contacts. Contacts you thought were luck or personal skill. I monitored you, I continued, looking directly at Helen. Every time you humiliated me, every gift thrown in the trash, every family photo I was excluded from. All documented. Eric finally found his voice. You can't just show up here and... "I can do exactly what I want," I replied, my voice cutting. "Including calling your debts bets. $50,000 you owe to 3 different websites, using this house as collateral." Eric's face turned gray. Helen turned to him in shock. "And Hannah," Clara said, pulling out another document, 3 fraudulent credit card applications. Fake income, fake information, using Robert as a guarantor without his permission." Hannah started to cry. I was going to pay it back. With what money? I asked. Her influencer career that you guys finance with my inheritance money. Robert tried to stand up, but his legs gave out. Sam, we can talk about this. We're family. Family. The word came out like poison. You spent 29 years reminding me that I wasn't family. That I was temporary. That I should be grateful for a roof over my head. Clara stood beside me. Miller Auto Sales will be sold on Monday. The funds will be used to pay off Eric and Hannah's debts. Whatever is left, if anything, will be donated to organizations that help adopted children. You can't do this, Helen cried, her composure finally breaking. You can't just destroy our life. We're not destroying it, I replied calmly. We're correcting it. You built this life at my expense. Now you're going to learn to live on your own. Robert tried one last card. Marcus Webb, our lawyer, will contest that. He knows all the details of your adoption. Clara smiled coldly. Marcus Webb lost his license in Colorado 3 years ago. Professional misconduct. He can't represent you in any state. That's when the final truth hit them. It wasn't just about money or property. It was about the fact that for 29 years, the boy they had despised had grown into the man who controlled their destinies. You always knew, I said, my voice breaking for the first time. You always knew I had a family, an inheritance, a future. And you chose to use that against me. Helen collapsed into her chair, tears streaming down her face. We thought we were doing the right thing. That you'd be better off with us. Better. Eric was in a panic. You ruined our life. How are we going to pay the bills? The same way I paid for your approval for 29 years, I replied. Working for it. Clara checked her watch. The papers will be signed on Monday at 9 in the morning. You have until Friday to vacate the house. The house. Hannah screamed. This is our home. Bought with Sam's inheritance money, Clara replied. Technically, it was always his. As we left, I turned one last time to the family that raised me. You taught me that family is a choice, not blood. Thank you for the lesson. Robert was on his knees on the living room floor. Helen was crying uncontrollably, Eric was punching the wall, and Hannah was recording a desperate video for Instagram, trying to save her image. But as I closed the door of that house for the last time, I felt no revenge or cruel satisfaction. I felt something I had never felt before, the complete peace of finally knowing exactly who I was and where I belonged. What they didn't know was that the real twist was yet to come on Monday. Because Clara hadn't mentioned the part about the federal investigation we had uncovered into Robert's questionable tax practices. But that would be a surprise for another time. On Monday morning at 9 o'clock sharp, Robert, Helen, Eric, and Hannah were sitting in the conference room of the Crawford & Associates law office in downtown Omaha. Their faces showed a mixture of panic, anger, and despair that I had never seen before. Clara looked impeccable in her gray suit, with an Italian leather briefcase at her side, while I positioned myself strategically to observe every reaction. The lawyer, Mr. Crawford, methodically opened the documents. Miller Auto Sales has been formally transferred to Samuel David Thornton, effective immediately, he announced with the professional neutrality of someone who had seen many families implode. All assets, including inventory, property, and business accounts. Robert tried to speak, but his voice came out as a croak. No. It can't be legal. 30 years building this business. With $500,000 from Sam's trust fund, Clara interrupted coldly. Money you used knowing full well where it came from. Helen collapsed into her chair, her decades-long composure finally broken. Sam, please. We're your family. We raised you. Family. I rose from my chair, my voice echoing through the room. Family doesn't use a child's money to raise other children while treating that child like a servant. Eric, desperate, tried his last card. You can't leave us with nothing. Where are we going to live? How are we going to pay the bills? The same way I did for 29 years, I replied calmly. You're going to work for it. Mr. Crawford continued reading. Regarding Eric Miller's online gambling debts in the amount of $52,000, Thornton Enterprises has assumed these debts and transferred them to legal collection. Eric's face turned white as a sheet. That means That means you now owe me directly, I finished. And I'm not as patient as the gambling websites. Hannah, who had remained silent, finally exploded. You're destroying our family out of petty revenge. We didn't know about the money. Clara laughed, a sound that cut through the air like breaking glass. You didn't know? Helen signed the trust fund documents. Robert had access to the bank statements for 29 years. You both grew up with privileges paid for by Sam's suffering. I picked up a folder I had prepared especially for this moment. You want to talk about not knowing? I opened it and spread photographs across the table. These are family photos from the last 20 years. Count how many times I appear in them. Helen began to cry silently, while Eric avoided looking at the images. 17 Christmas photos. I'm in 2, always in the background, always cut off halfway. My voice remained calm, but every word carried 29 years of pain. 23 birthdays documented. I was invited to 5. Robert tried one last plea. Sam, you can have the business, but at least let us stay in the house. We have nowhere else to go. The house? Clara consulted her papers. The house bought entirely with Sam's inheritance money? That house. You have until Friday to move out, I announced. I've already hired a moving company. They'll be there Saturday morning to remove anything that's still there. Hannah stood up abruptly. You can't do this. This has been our home for 20 years. It was my home for 29 years, I replied, my voice finally showing emotion. But you never allowed me to feel that way. Mr. Crawford interrupted our discussion. There is one more issue. The tax investigation into Miller Auto sales practices has revealed significant discrepancies over the past 5 years. Robert paled even more. What kind of discrepancies? Tax evasion in the amount of $83,000, Clara replied. Normally, this would result in criminal prosecution. But the new owner of the company has decided to settle the debt and resolve the situation administratively. For a moment, genuine gratitude flashed in Robert's eyes. Sam, thank you. You didn't have to. I didn't do it for you, I interrupted. I did it to protect the reputation of the company that is now mine. You deserve neither my mercy nor my anger. Eric tried again. What if we try to pay you back? All the money you spent on us. Clara smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. $500,000 in 1994 is worth approximately $900,000 today, considering inflation and compound interest. Do you have $900,000, Eric? The silence in the room was deafening. I didn't think so. When we left the office, Clara put her hand on my shoulder. How do you feel? Free, I replied without hesitation. For the first time in 29 years, completely free. 3 months later, I was in my new office in Seattle, overlooking Puget Sound, when I received an unexpected call. It was Grandpa Henry. Sam, have you seen the news? What news? Eric was arrested yesterday. He tried to rob a bank in Council Bluffs. Apparently, he was desperate for money. I felt a twinge of, not satisfaction, more like closure. What about the others? Helen is working as a secretary at a veterinary clinic. Robert got a job selling used cars for another dealership. Hannah is living with her mother and trying to rebuild her career online. And you? How are you adjusting to Seattle? Henry laughed. Better than ever, kid. Clara gave me a garden to tend on the roof terrace. And you know how I love to grow things. 6 months later, Miller Auto Sales, now renamed Thornton Motors, had become the most respected dealership in Omaha. I had implemented credit programs for low-income families and partnerships with local charities. It was during the grand opening of the expansion that I saw Helen across the street. She was standing on the sidewalk, watching the commotion, the colorful flags, the happy customers coming and going. Our eyes met for a moment. She didn't approach, didn't wave, just stood there. On her face, I saw something I had never seen before, recognition. Not just of who I was, but of who I had always been. Clara appeared at my side. Do you want to talk to her? No, I replied, turning my attention back to the customers. There's nothing to say. A year later, I received a letter. The handwriting was Helen's, but it was shaky and tired. Sam, I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to know, I was wrong. Not about the money or the practical decisions, but about you. You were always special, always worthy of unconditional love, and I was too cowardly to admit it. You have become the man I always knew you could be, in spite of us, not because of us. I hope you find the peace you deserve. I folded the letter and put it in my drawer. Not to reread it, but to remind myself that even the people who hurt us the most are capable of growth. 2 years later, on my 31st birthday, I was on the rooftop terrace in Seattle, watching the sun set over Puget Sound. Clara had prepared an intimate dinner, just me, her, and Grandpa Henry. Sam, Clara said, raising her wine glass, I want to make a toast. Not to the success you've achieved, but to the man you've chosen to be. Explain. You had the power to completely destroy their lives. You could have sent Robert to prison, left Helen without a pension, ruined Eric irreversibly. But you chose justice, not revenge. Henry nodded. You became greater than the pain they tried to inflict on you. I looked out at the horizon, where the sun was beginning to set behind the mountains. You know, for years I thought they were my family and that I was the problem. That if I were better, more perfect, more useful, they would love me. And now? Clara asked. Now I understand that family isn't about blood or who raised you. It's about who chooses to see you, value you, love you for who you are. I looked at Clara and Henry. Family is about mutual choice. Clara smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. Do you want to know what my proudest moment has been during this whole situation? What was it? When you decided to pay off their tax debt. In that moment, you proved that you weren't seeking revenge, but justice. You're my son, Sam. Not just by biology, but by character. If you've made it this far on this journey of discovery, transformation, and justice, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that our true family is made up of those who choose to love us, not those who are obligated to tolerate us. Today, 5 years later, I'm Vice President of Thornton Enterprises, responsible for all operations in the Midwest. The company has grown 40% under my leadership, and we've implemented social responsibility programs that help foster children and vulnerable families. Eric served 2 years in prison and when he got out, got a job at an auto repair shop. From what I hear, he finally learned the value of honest work. Hannah rebuilt her career online, focusing on content about overcoming adversity and personal growth. Robert and Helen divorced, but both found stable jobs and learned to live within their means. I don't feel anger toward them. I don't feel satisfaction at their difficulties. I feel only the peace that comes when you finally find your place in the world. The last time I was in Omaha, I visited the cemetery where Robert's grandfather is buried, the man he said I never knew. I discovered that he had served in World War II and dedicated his life to helping orphan children. I left flowers on his grave and whispered, "Thank you for teaching me that family is about choice, not blood." Because in the end, Robert, Helen, Eric, and Hannah weren't my family. They were just the people who raised me until I found the people who chose me. And that difference made all the difference.